of course, it's going to be a very week-long meeting in Washington, D.C. The president of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, has this presentation as his curtain-raising press briefing on what to expect in this week. Let's take that, and then we'll return to our guest at the Abuja studios.
Start by speaking briefly about the broader global economic context from the viewpoint of our clients, the emerging markets. And as we all know, uncertainty and volatility are undoubtedly contributing to a more cautious economic and business environment. I think that's going to affect how governments and businesses make their investment decisions right now. But meanwhile, interestingly, developing economies are playing a far more central role in global trade than they did, say, 2 decades ago. And in that time, the global trade has nearly quadrupled in nominal terms. And the share of the developing countries in that trade has nearly doubled from about 1/5 to almost 2/5. And again, half of their exports now go to other developing countries. At time back in 2000, that was just 1/4. I think this shift brings both an opportunity and exposure. Countries with export-led growth models, particularly those reliant on commodities or manufactured goods, they're much more vulnerable to disruption. But they also have policy levers to help manage the uncertainty and position themselves for a longer-term resilience. So to give you an example, many developing economies still maintain higher tariffs than advanced economies. On the average, several percentage points higher on key imports. I think that creates a real risk of reciprocal tariffs and, most importantly, lost competitiveness. So a broad-based liberalization, not just with favored partners, can help offset these risks and actually expand market access. And history shows that more open economies tend to grow faster and they withstand shocks more effectively. Second, there is untapped potential in deeper regional integration. Trade among developing economies is growing rapidly. Nearly half of exports from these countries, as I said, now go to other emerging markets. Strengthening regional ties through more efficient border processes, lower trade costs, less friction, clear rules of origin, these can boost trade volumes and support more stable and diversified growth. The point is, these aren't abstract principles. They're practical strategies, and they could be done with these countries. We know that development is a long-term endeavor. It's not always linear, but history does show that progress is still possible even during periods of disruption. And while I don't yet know how this uncertainty will impact global growth, what we are seriously thinking through is our toolbox, drawing upon our prior experiences, for example, with COVID or the 2008-09 financial crisis. In partnership with the IMF, with our local presence, global reach, and through our financing, technical support, and infrastructure, I think we can help enable both domestic productivity and international trade for some of these emerging markets. So that's the broader context. Now let me take a few minutes to talk about the World Bank Group itself, what makes it uniquely valuable, how it works, and how we're evolving in our current context. So I'll start with the basics. How the bank is structured, why that matters. I'm going to walk through our financial model, and from there, I'm going to go to the reforms we've made to move faster and to do more. And then I'm going to focus on jobs and what to expect at the spring meetings next week. And I'm going to close with some news about the next phase of the private sector lab. The World Bank was not born of altruism, but of strategic design. It was meant to help forge a more stable, prosperous world, where economies could grow, conflict could be avoided, and private capital could find new frontiers. This wasn't charity. It was a calculated investment in the global economic architecture, one that I believe has paid off many times over in these 80 years. But today, the questions we hear in both developed and developing countries are remarkably similar. What does the future look like here? Why should we invest in it? And those are fair questions. Some of you may have similar questions. So let me talk about that for just a minute. Let's start by walking you through the structure of the bank. It really is unlike any other institution in the development landscape. The World Bank Group is made up of 5 arms that operate as one integrated platform. The International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, which lends to middle-income and creditworthy low-income countries. It finances infrastructure, roads, schools, hospitals, energy, things like that. Then there's the International Development Association, IDA, which supports the world's poorest countries with a combination of grants and low interest loans. It helps places that cannot access capital markets, that they can invest in the basics of development. So over time, 36 IDA countries like South Korea, India, and Turkey, these have grown and they've graduated from being IDA recipients. Then there's the International Finance Corporation, IFC, which invests directly in private businesses, particularly in challenging sectors and regions. The idea there is to mobilize private capital to create jobs and support entrepreneurship. Then there's the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA, which provides political risk insurance. It protects investors from threats like expropriation, conflict, and currency restrictions. And the last one is the International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes, ICSID, which offers legal protection by resolving disputes between investors and sovereigns and governments, reinforcing the rule of law and investment confidence. There's no other institution that brings all of this together in one place, and that's what makes the World Bank Group uniquely positioned to support countries and investors across the entire development journey. And because we try and operate this as a system, I think we can work to deliver development finance at scale far beyond what any single entity could do alone. Now, the model isn't just powerful in terms of the volume it can put to work, it's efficient. Because over the past 80 years, $29 billion in shareholder capital that has been contributed to IBRD, IFC, and MIGA has mobilized $1.6 trillion in development finance. That's 50 to 1. In the last fiscal year, 24 alone, we deployed $133 billion. Now, IDA works differently, powerfully, but differently. Every dollar contributed typically delivers $4 in financing for IDA. The bank's financial strength is also sound. IBRD and IDA have never written off a loan. Administrative costs, salaries, travel, real estate, etc., are covered by income from repayments and investments, not from donor dollars. And we've made steady progress on internal efficiency. We brought our operating costs down to just under 50% of earnings from just under 70% a couple of years ago. Now, having a strong model is not enough. And to meet today's challenges, migration surges, youth unemployment, and growing fragility, we've had to become faster, more responsive, more focused. And that's what the past 2 years of reform have been about. We've cut project approval times by 26%, from 19 months to 14, with a target of 12 months by this June. Some projects, by the way, are now approved in under 30 days. We've streamlined operations. We've combined over 40 country offices. We're launching new tools to help governments prepare bankable projects faster. We've cut duplication. We've launched a joint platform across the multilateral development banks that has grown from 74 to over 170 pipeline projects in a year. 10 projects have already secured full financing through this portal, totaling $14 billion of financing. We're turning to results. We're focusing our corporate scorecard on 22 real impact metrics instead of what was earlier 158 input process indicators. We've expanded our balance sheet. We've added $150 billion in lending capacity through hybrid capital, equity to loan ratio changes, and new instruments like 50-year loans and rate buydowns. But the thing is that reform alone is not enough. And to deliver opportunity at scale, what we need was a sharper focus. That's why we've made job creation the centerpiece of our agenda. You've heard me speak about this for quite a few months now, but over the next decade, 1.2 billion young people will enter the workforce in developing countries. Currently, the forecast is for those countries to deliver 420 million jobs. And that gap is not just an economic issue. I think it's a global risk because without opportunity, the forces of fragility, of illegal migration, of instability, these forces grow stronger. So if you're interested in understanding the situation in your specific country or region, I'm sure we can get you information specific to that country or that region. We're taking basically a practical three-part approach. Our public sector arms, that's IBRD and IDA, they work with governments to lay the foundation, to deploy finance towards infrastructure, education, healthcare, food security. These are the essential conditions, the enabling infrastructure for people and businesses to thrive. Our Knowledge Bank helps to create the right environment by supporting regulatory and policy reforms, building on that infrastructure, improving governance, and linking financing to results. So in 2024, nearly half of our public sector financing was performance-based, linked to results, up from 28% a decade ago. And finally, through our private sector arms, IFC and MEAGR, we can help to mobilize investment, provide financing and risk and mitigation, and support business growth in areas like energy and infrastructure, agribusiness, healthcare, tourism, manufacturing. These are sectors that create large numbers of jobs, and all of these are backstopped by ICSID's capabilities in settling disputes. This jobs-focused strategy was the motivation behind the Jobs Council that President Tharman of Singapore and former President Michelle Bachelet of Chile are leading. This is at the heart of our spring meetings next week, because it reflects both our urgency and our conviction that development must lead to opportunity. We've also had to confront a hard truth, which is the private capital part of the story. The private capital that over the years, people have spoken of the billions to trillions. That era did not show up in the scale everybody hoped. It wasn't because the money didn't exist. It's because the conditions weren't right for that money to be employed for the purposes we wanted.
That's the president of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, raising the question on what to expect this week.